The Haynes Custom Harvesting Trailer is a unique design created in-house by the Haynes team. Longtime Rockin customer Paul Nivy from England commissioned the first Haynes trailer. This tutorial will teach how to make your own trailer constructed from brass. The material list will consist of the following: 3/16 by 3/32 inch rectangular brass tubing, 3/32 by 3/32 square tubing, 3/16 inch brass pipe, 1/2 inch flat brass sheet, soldering iron, flux, solder, and number 8-32 nuts. I used a jig I made from aluminum bar and a few of the nuts for making combine trailers. The same jig can be created using magnets on a piece of flat sheet metal. To begin, cut the two main frame beams from rectangular tubing to 5 1/4 inches in length and place two number 8-32 nuts in between for approximately 1/4 inch of gap in between the beams. Notice on the outside I have two long pieces of square tubing on either side of the beams. This will keep the stringers in alignment when those are added. Do follow this step. Cut 18 stringers to 13/16 inch length. Beginning at the front, place two spacers that are 3/32 inch in between the front of the jig and the first stringer. You can use the square tube for this, but be careful not to solder the spacer tube to the first stringer. After the stringer is set, alternate the nuts and square tube until the tubes are used up. Place a spacer and clamp it at the back of the stringer to hold them all tight in place. Finally, cut two pieces of rectangular tubing to go between the mainframe rails to add strength and hold the trailer together. I had scraps of square tubing, so I used them for this purpose. Before soldering all the parts together, it is good practice to take a ruler and measure corner to corner to ensure the trailer will be square. When confident the trailer is square, begin soldering all the parts together. I took my trailer out of the jig and turned it around to have a flat spot to add the rear end. When the parts are all soldered, cut a piece of square tube to 2 1/16 inch and place it at the back of the main beams, then solder in place. To have the proper height for the axles, cut two pieces of square tubing 1.5 inches long each. Set them flush with the main beams. Use alligator clips to hold them in place for soldering. Cut two more pieces of square tubing 1/2 inch long and solder to the top of the trailer. Set the pieces flush with the main beams and hold them in place with alligator clips for soldering. These two pieces will hold the fifth wheel plate in place. There is a round tube at the front of the real trailer. Create this by using 3/16 inch pipe. Cut it to 2 1/16 inch wide. I took flat brass sheet and soldered it to the ends to cap them. Styrene could be used for this purpose as well. When I had the flat sheet soldered to the pipe, I cut off the excess scrap, then rounded it off using my stationary sander. Attach the tube to the front of the trailer by setting the trailer on pieces of leftover rectangular or square tubing. The back of the trailer has square tubing that was soldered in place already, so the trailer will set level. Make sure the pipe is square to the trailer and solder in place. Create the fenders using thin 1/2 inch flat brass. Cut two pieces approximately 1 3/4 inches long. Do not be afraid to cut them a little bit long. From the center of the sheet, measure 5/8 out from the center on both sides and draw a line. The center of the fender will be 1 1/4 inches long. In a vise, place the scrap side of the fender into the line that was drawn. Bend each side of the fender to approximately 45 degrees. This may take several attempts to get correct and will depend on how close the measurements I gave were followed. Make sure both fenders match as close as possible. Place one on the rear end and one on the first stringer from the back. Slide them to the outside edge of the stringers. Use magnets to hold them in place. That will help ensure that they go on square and even. On the real Haynes trailer, there is a spot for the combine to rest. It can be seen in the concave piece of metal in front of the rear axles. Plus, there is another flat spot in front of the rear axles that serves as a partial ramp for the combine to climb up and over the axles when loading and unloading. To simplify the build, I chose to use a piece of flat 1/2 inch brass, 7/8 inches long, to include both of these parts. Set this piece at the back of the three stringers and solder in place. I found the trickiest part of the whole build to be the gooseneck. Starting with the rectangular tubing, cut two pieces 1 3/4 inches long. Measure in 1 inch and draw a line. With a triangle file or square file on edge, cut the groove through the other side of the brass. Do not separate the brass. When the filing is complete, bend the brass to approximately 45 degrees. A simple way to get the angles correct: on a piece of metal, use magnets to hold the brass in place and solder the gap together. I have tried cutting two separate pieces at an angle, then soldering, which works, but I found the method I have described to be the simplest way to make this part. To complete the gooseneck, take another piece of rectangular tubing, 1 11/16 inch wide, and place it between the gooseneck parts. Solder this in place. Level the trailer body using spacers such as coins from your coin jar. When the body is level, take the gooseneck and place the angled pieces on the tube. Place the front of the gooseneck on your truck of choice. If the gooseneck is level, solder it in place. Sorry, I have no magic way to make this happen easy. An extra set of hands is helpful though. If the gooseneck is pitched with the front end down, shorten the rear arms. If the front is pitched up, well, I'm afraid you'll have to start over on that part. Drill a 3/32 inch hole in the center of the piece laid flat for the kingpin. A 6-penny finish nail works excellent as a kingpin for DCP trucks if that is the truck you're using. Take a small file and remove any excess solder and clean up unattractive joints. Clean the entire trailer in mineral spirits to remove flux so paint sticks well. Prime and paint. The final step is adding a fifth wheel plate to pull a hopper just like the real rig. I use a fifth wheel plate I salvaged from a DCP truck. To complete the trailers, add DOT tape and details of choice to give a personal look. Your custom trailer is finished and ready to enjoy. Thanks for watching and subscribe to Rockin to get all this great content. See you in the next video.